My name is Jason Graves, and I'm the franchise composer for the Dead Space series. My musical background, I'm actually a drummer, originally a drummer, and then I kind of turned into a classically trained percussionist, and then kind of learned piano and guitar along the way. But I've always been involved with music. It just so happened I had the no-brainer idea of putting music and games together about 8 years ago. So I went to graduate school at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles, and that was for a film and television music program. And I'm pretty sure now that it also is film, television, and games. They've rolled the games in there, but at the time, there wasn't games involved. But I did a lot of live orchestra stuff in Los Angeles and eventually moved back to North Carolina and suddenly kind of found myself with this unknown notoriety of being this like cool LA guy that does live orchestra stuff. So I started doing some orchestra things around town and someone else found out about it, and the first game that I worked on was the King Arthur game. That it wasn't live orchestra, but it was computerized MIDI orchestra, and I just kind of treated it the way I would a live orchestra. And there was this great freedom that came that was the antithesis of everything I'd experienced in Los Angeles, where we wanted to sound like Hans Zimmer because it's King Arthur. I mean, they wanted it to sound kind of like Hans Zimmer, but I had creative freedom to kind of write anything I wanted. So I'd been missing that the whole entire time. I've been working in music for probably 4 years before I started in games, and I always felt creatively frustrated. And games, it was like the whole world opened up, and I was able to do the kind of music that I wanted to do without too much interference. I hate to sound derivative, but Giacchino's Medal of Honor score was actually the first thing before I got involved in games that kind of turned my ear and said, this is video game music? Because it sounded so cinematic and immersive and just realistic. You know, it really spoke to me about the drama that you could evoke with music and games. So I kind of followed him the whole way and was kind of, you know, living with him as he went, you know, in my brain. I was like, oh cool, he's doing this game. Oh cool, he's doing a TV show. And what I loved about that is it shows that a good composer can kind of work in any medium. And I'm happy staying in games. I'm in North Carolina. I'm not going to be moving to Los Angeles trying to do movies or anything. But kind of his mental attitude and the epitome that he projected as a composer was a big influence on me. And like, well, that's cool. I could do something like that. Like, I would love to do that kind of music for games. So that's what kind of jump-started the whole thing for me. Dead Space, yeah, what an incredible ride. I mean, every time we do a new title, I'm always at the beginning before I start, I'm pulling out my hair, you know, kind of, oh my gosh, what am I going to do to make it different or to make it new, to kind of be creative, to keep myself interested in it, and also try to keep in line with what everyone's kind of expecting the score to sound like. But it's one of those things, the whole experience really changed the way I thought about composing, starting on the first game. I mean, from how I record the musicians to how I end up writing the music for the score, how the music's implemented into the game. I mean, it was this career changer in many regards because a lot of people recognize my name with the score from the first Dead Space. But as a composer, creatively and emotionally, it also changed me dramatically because there was so much more kind of details, and it's almost like, you know, you see a picture of a gun would be a good example for Dead Space. So you see this gun and it's a computer generated thing and it kind of disassembles into all the little tiny parts and goes back together, you know, if they're doing some tactical speed. It's almost like that's how I saw the music in Dead Space. There was this final thing, but by the time I finished it, I could take it all apart in my head and kind of figure out what it was going to sound like, and then before I even started writing the piece, record all those little tiny pieces and then put it back together into the final thing. And like any good musical education, it really impacted how I was working on everything else, not just the Dead Space title. So any other games that I work on, I'm kind of approaching this deconstructive attitude on how the music's put together. And especially with the second Dead Space, Andrew and I kept joking, the first meeting we had together, saying, well, it needs to be, it needs to be new. And I said, but different and better, but still the same, right? And it became this new joke, like the same, but different, but better. That was kind of my attitude for the score for this sequel. It needs to have the same kind of attitude as the first one did, but it needs to be different enough that people recognize it as a different score, yet it needs to be better than the first one. So I had no idea how I was going to do it when I first started, but again, with that deconstructive thing, I'm really, really excited about the final result. I mean, I haven't had this much creative latitude and freedom, which of course gets me excited internally on any project. So as terrible and awful sounding as the score is, I hold it really close to my heart. Yeah, that's usually how it works. Most of the tracks that I do are four, almost four different pieces of music. So the idea would be, if you're in the church, exploring the Unitology church, the first layer would play just as a general, creepy vibe. You probably won't even notice that it's there. Just this really kind of ambient, choir or strings or brass. And the second layer comes in, maybe there's something you need to go do and it amps it up a little bit. A little more tension, a little more rhythm. The third layer comes in when something starts to attack you, or you see something that's going to attack you. And as it gets closer, as you start fighting, or especially if they end up grabbing you by the shoulders and they're chomping on your neck or something, then the fourth layer plays, which is just complete and utter chaos. So a lot of times what I do is compose exactly that way. They'll say, here's the scene, here's the setting, this is what you see, or they'll send me a video, here's what it looks like. And I just kind of almost build it like a sandwich, a musical, really disturbing sandwich from the ground up, and do the first layer and the second layer and the third layer and the fourth layer. And again, being a drummer, a lot of that stuff, I do rhythmic permutations. All this off-kilter kind of thing where you listen to the music and you can't figure out where it's gonna, the next bar is coming from. So it throws you off. And of course, there's all these horrific monsters attacking you. So you put the two of those things together and it's kind of, at least that's what it did to me when I was playing. With the original one, I did a lot of research in just 20th century music in general. Chance music, kind of abstract stuff, custom built instruments, things like that. The cool thing about the second one, just the way Isaac had kind of been there, done that, and moved forward from where he left off with the first one, I didn't do any research or have, look for any outside influences. I was basically kind of approaching it like, well, let's see what this Jason Graves guy did with the first one, and maybe I can do something a little different and at least, not get bored with it. So that was kind of the cool thing, because it's really one of the first titles where not only did the developer not ask me for, we want it to sound like this movie or this piece of classical music, but I didn't really feel the need to research things and try to figure out what I wanted it to sound like. I just kind of let it emerge, and especially with the string quartet stuff, I was really tickled because it's got some thematic stuff, but it still sounds dead spacey, and it's kind of cool. I mean, for me personally, I feel like it's unique to me as a composer. You asked me this 6 months ago, and I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about anything else that's been. I even asked a couple of them, because some of them I've been finished with for months now, and I'm still not allowed to talk. But there's another really cool horror franchise that I did that's coming out, the beginning of next year, and I've got a fantasy game that I'm working on that's another franchise piece. I seem to be doing a lot of franchise things. A great action adventure thing that I just started on that I'm really, really excited about. And some other projects too, a documentary and a kind of a film with some friends of mine, and kind of more classical opera commission thing. And what I love is, you've got horror, action, adventure, documentary, the documentary is like blues music. I mean, I love listening to all that stuff, and I love working on all that kind of stuff. And that's the thing about games. I may be pigeonholed a little bit as the dark guy that does orchestra music, but what's great is now people are coming and saying, we really like, the originality of the music for Dead Space. but we're not doing a horror game. You know, we want you to do something that interests you and sounds original and, you know, will keep you motivated, but is unique to our game. That's what I love about games. I'm a huge foodie, although people that know me wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I'm kind of obsessed with food, and if I'm not composing, I'm cooking, which I haven't been cooking much lately, much to the chagrin of my wife. But you know, food and music, I mean, they're like identical to me. If you're composing music or you're cooking a meal, you know, you're taking all these disparate elements and kind of recombining them in a certain way to present something that, you know, maybe people have had before, but not your version of it. And I mean, even just saying that, I could be talking about a piece of music, or I could be talking about a, you know, secret recipe meatloaf or something. Yeah, love, love, love food. I think the most important thing, if anyone, whether you want to be in games, television, music, or a rock band, you know, maybe you don't want to, you know, be working for the man. You want to do your own music, and you've got this creativity that, you know, the world needs to hear. As long as you don't box yourself in. I mean, I think you know, you could say, I want to be a film composer. That's the one thing I want to do. As long as you realize that, you know, even if you do end up being a film composer in 15 years, the road to being a film composer or a game composer or a rock player in a successful band, there's a lot of other stuff you're going to have to do to get there. But everything you do, you know, kind of creates who you are and what you know, and ends up turning you into the composer or musician that you end up being later on. So I would say be as diversified as possible, you know, and don't just concentrate on, I'm a guitarist and I know how to record guitar and I know my amps and my pedals, you know. Learn how a mixing board works, learn what a compressor does, learn how to EQ things, learn how to mix your own stuff. You know, if you want to be a composer in any genre, write music all the time, whether or not you're getting paid for it, and study music all the time, listen to music all the time, and you know, give music to your friends, get critiques, let them know what you think. And while you're doing that, you know, learn how to record a radio voiceover, learn how to, you know, cut a 60-second commercial. I mean, the more diversified you are, and the more that you're able to kind of work in the industry in general, even if you're an assistant to somebody, you know, you're learning stuff firsthand. You know, the happier you'll end up being, and the more well-rounded you'll be once you finally do get to do what you want to do.